Good afternoon, dear students. Let us discuss about scintillation counters to measure radioactive isotopes. Scintillation counters are based on excitation of element. Okay, Geiger counters are generally based on ionization of elements. So let us discuss scintillation counters. Scintillation counters have, you can say, they are more widely used as compared to Geiger tubes. Okay, after excitation, whenever a molecule is exposed to radiation, it gets excited. And after excitation the electrons are transferred to higher energy orbital. Okay, and after excitation, when the electron want to descend back to their ground state, it emits out electromagnetic radiations. Okay, certain compounds called as fluors, when they are excited, they fluoresce. This phenomena of fluorescence due to excitation by radioactivity is known as scintillation. Okay, there are certain compounds which are known as fluors. They fluoresce upon excitation. Okay, so the phenomena of fluorescence due to excitation by radiation, radioactivity is known as scintillation. The light that is emitted in scintillation can be detected by coupling it to a photomultiplier, which converts the photon energy into electrical pulse whose magnitude remains proportional to the energy of the original radioactive event. Okay, I repeat, the light that is emitted during scintillation, okay, is detected by coupling it with a photomultiplier. The photomultiplier converts photon energy into electrical pulse. The magnitude of the electrical pulse is proportional to the energy of the original radioactive event. Okay, this is the considerable advantage of scintillation counters over Geiger counters, enabling scintillation counters to detect and measure two different isotopes in the same sample. Okay, so they have a upper hand. Scintillation counters have an upper hand. Now, there are two types of scintillation counters which are commonly used. Number one, solid scintillation counter and liquid scintillation counters, out of which liquid scintillation counters are of more use. Okay, in solid or external scintillation counting, the sample is placed close to floor crystals. Okay, your sample, okay, is placed close to the floor crystals. Floor crystals, what are floors? We have discussed. Crystallized zinc sulfide for alpha emitters, sodium for gamma emitters, anthracene for beta emitters. These are the floor crystals. Okay, zinc sulfide for alpha emitters, sodium for gamma emitters, anthracene for beta emitters. So your sample is placed close to the floor crystals. Okay, the floor crystals in turn is placed adjacent to the photomultiplier. The photomultiplier is connected to a high voltage supply and a scaler. Okay, let us see the diagram and understand. Alright, you can see here a solid scintillation counter and a liquid scintillation counter. So this one is a solid scintillation counter. So what it is? Thus you have a sample which is placed adjacent to the floor. So this is your sample placed adjacent to the floor, which is placed adjacent to the photomultiplier, and the photomultiplier in turn is connected to a scaler and a detector. Is that clear? That is the arrangement in a solid scintillation counter. Okay. Now, solid scintillation counting is particularly useful for measurement of gamma emitting isotopes, gamma radiation emitting isotopes, because gamma rays are electromagnetic radiation, okay, and they have high penetration power as compared to beta emitters, and only rarely collide with neighboring atoms to cause ionization or excitation. Obviously, when you have a solid sample, the densely packed atom in a crystal provide a better chance of collision. Okay. On the other hand, solid scintillation counting is not so satisfactory for weak beta emitters, because even the, you can say, highest energy negatron has very low penetration power. So soft beta emitters will fail to cause sizable ionization or excitation in a crystal, right? So in a solid scintillation counting is particularly useful for emitting for measurement of gamma emitting isotopes having more you can say ability to cause ionization, excitation and penetrate. So the densely packed atoms in a crystal provide a better chance of collision. Okay, for beta emitters, solid scintillation counting may not be satisfactory. So for beta emitters, we prefer liquid scintillation counting. Okay. What happens in a liquid or internal scintillation counting? The liquid or scintillation counting is extremely useful for quantitating soft beta emitters. What is here? What is the arrangement here? The radioactive sample is dissolved or suspended in a scintillation system. Okay, the scintillation system is a cocktail of solvent and primary and secondary scintillators. Okay, right. So in a liquid scintillation counter, what we do is sample is mixed with, or radioactive sample is dissolved or suspended in a scintillation system containing solvent plus primary and secondary scintillators. Primary and secondary scintillators are primary and secondary fluors actually. Okay. So here sample plus scintillator plus solvent plus primary and secondary scintillator. Right. Now the radiation from the suspended sample, the radiation from the radioactive sample molecule collide with the solvent molecule, imparting a discrete amount of its energy to the solvent molecule. That means the radiation from the suspended sample collide with the solvent molecule and they transfer their energy to the solvent molecule. This transfer of energy is most efficient if the solvent is aromatic like toluene. 100% of efficiency of energy transfer, or xylene 97% of efficiency of energy transfer. Okay, if you use organic solvents like ethanol or acetone, energy transfer is not efficient, but if you use aromatic solvents like xylene or toluene, the energy transfer is highly efficient, 97 or 100%. Okay, so energy from energy of the radiation from sample transferred to solvent molecule. Transfer of energy is efficient if your solvent is aromatic. Collision with the solvent molecule and concomitant loss of energy are repeated events. Okay, which perpetuate until the radiation has lost most of its energy and gets captured, right? So the radiation emitted from the sample transfers its energy to the solvent. Okay, let us check the arrangement, how it takes place. You have sample plus fluor. Okay, so sample plus solvent. Sample you can say placed in a solvent along with you can say fluors, primary and secondary fluors, and the instrument has light tight cover. Okay, so that light should not escape, and then which in turn is connected to a photomultiplier, adjacent to a photomultiplier which is connected to a scalar, a detector system. Okay, now the solvent molecule which has absorbed the radiation or energy from the sample becomes excited as a result of collision with the radioactive substance, right? The solvent molecule which has become excited as a result of collision with radioactive substance emits out radiation by phosphorescence. Okay, emits out radiation by phosphorescence when it comes back to ground state. Okay, the radiation that is emitted by the solvent molecule is in the range of 260 to 340 nanometer. Okay, so the first thing is the sample emits radiation, radiation goes and collides with the solvent molecule absorbs energy of radiation, becomes excited, and when it wants to come back to its ground state, it emits out radiation by a phenomena called as phosphorescence. The radiation which is given out by the solvent has a, you can say, wavelength of 260 to 340 nanometer, but this wavelength is too short to be detected by the existing instruments. Hence, how to detect it then? To overcome this problem, a second molecule called fluor is placed in the cocktail mixture. Right. So, the energy of the radiation that is emitted by the solvent is absorbed by the primary floor. Okay, thus the primary floor absorbs the light released by the solvent and fluoresces to emit out light of higher wavelength, say 340 to 430 nanometer. Is that clear? So the radiation emitted by the solvent is absorbed by the primary floor. It undergoes fluorescence and emits light of higher wavelength, that is 340 to 430 nanometer. This light also may not be detected by a simple detector. So, this light is then absorbed by a secondary floor, which we call as secondary scintillator. Okay, this light is absorbed by the secondary floor and it emits out light of still higher wavelength. That is, the secondary floor will absorb the light energy from primary floor and will emit light energy in visible range, which can be easily measured by the photomultiplier. See, nowadays in recent techniques only primary floors are used because high power detectors are available with us. Right. So you have a radioactive molecule which emits beta radiation which goes and strikes the solvent molecule. We have shown a benzene ring here. It's a representation that your solvent is aromatic. Okay. So your solvent absorbs the energy released by the radioactive molecule, becomes excited and emits out radiation due to phosphorescence when it goes back to its ground state. The energy that is emitted out by the solvent molecule cannot be detected by the detector. So it is absorbed by a primary floor. Okay. Now the primary floor absorbs the energy which is in the range of 260 to in the range of 340 nanometers. Okay. Now the primary floor will absorb the energy released by the solvent molecule, become excited, right? And it will also emit out radiation. These radiations are absorbed by secondary floor. Okay, and the secondary floor emits out radiation in visible range. That visible light is detected by a photomultiplier tube. But nowadays, because we have strong detectors, we use only primary floor molecules. Okay, the energy released by the primary floor in the range of say 260 to 340 nanometer can be detected by a photomultiplier tube. Okay. The primary floors generally emit out radiation in the range of say 340 to 430 nanometer that can be detected by highly sensitive photomultipliers used in today's instruments, right? So this is how it taken. This is how the whole detection procedure occurs in a scintillation counter. It should be noted that only about 5% of the total radiation energy is finally observed as light. The rest of the energy is released out as heat. The number of collision with the solvent molecule is the function of initial radiation energy. Hence, the amount of light emitted is directly proportional to the radiation energy. Now, what are the different types of solvents that are used to dissolve the solvent? To dissolve the radioactive sample molecule, as I told you, ethanol or acetone, xylene, toluene. There are so many solvents that can be used. But if they are aromatic like xylene or toluene, the percentage of efficiency of energy transfer is very, very high. Okay, so these are the different types of floors that can be used. Okay, primary scintillators or primary floors like 2,5-diphenyl oxazole can be used. Okay, and secondary floors like bis MSB, right? 1,4 bis MSB is used. Okay, or we can use a dimethyl POPOP, right? That is 1,4 bis 5-O-toluenyl oxazole benzene. Okay, so these are the different types of primary or secondary scintillators that can be used, that are used in scintillation counting, right? Now, what are the advantages of scintillation counting over Geiger-Müller counter? Now, it has already been discussed that soft beta emitters cannot be satisfactorily detected by Geiger counter. Okay. Now, see, the hydrogen isotope 3H, okay, can be measured with 5% efficiency in a Geiger counter, but it can be measured with 50% efficiency in a scintillation counter. Okay, and any kind of sample, be it solid, liquid, emulsion, gel, chromatogram, can be detected by same scintillation counter. You don't need any additional accessories. This is the advantage. Then, Geiger counters cannot differentiate between radiation of different isotope, so cannot be used to measure dual or triple labeled samples. But dual or triple labeled samples can be easily measured by scintillation counter. Now, fluorescence decay is very rapid as compared to dead time in Geiger-Müller counter. Okay, much higher count rates are possible in scintillation counter because fluorescence decay is very rapid. So, there is no dead time and all. Sample preparation for scintillation counting is generally devoid of complexities. It is very simple to prepare the sample for scintillation counters as compared to a Geiger counter. Okay. Now, what are the disadvantages of a scintillation counter? Quenching is one most important disadvantage. Higher cost and high voltage applied. Okay, because high voltage applied, background count effect occurs and it causes photomultiplier noise. This photomultiplier noise can be reduced by cooling the photomultiplier tube. Okay, so because of high voltage, photomultiplier noise may occur, which can be reduced by cooling. Now let us discuss about what is quenching. Okay, now quenching refers to reduction in the efficiency of transferring energy from beta particle to photomultiplier tube. Okay, transfer of energy from beta multipliers to photomultiplier tube. Okay, that results in the production of a pulse of reduced voltage. This type of quenching, there are basically three to four types of quenching that take place. Okay, chemical quenching, color quenching and dilution quenching. These are the three main types of quenching effect which occur, and one more may be optical quenching. Okay, now what is chemical quenching? Sometimes our sample contains a substance which can absorb the beta particle without emitting any photons. Okay, that means a substance may be present in the sample which will absorb the beta particle and will not emit out any photon. Okay, because photons are not released, the floor does not get excited, the primary scintillator does not get excited, and rather we can say that the beta particle, the energy of the beta particle is eaten up even if before it reach the floor. Okay, there are certain substances which absorb the photons that are emitted by the floor, and because the photons or the beta particles are absorbed by the substance present in the sample itself, it cannot be detected, and this results in chemical quenching. Okay, thus sufficient energy cannot reach the detector because it is already absorbed by the substance that was present in the sample, and hence a weak pulse is obtained and it will give you false result. Such a process is called as chemical quenching. Chemical quenching occurs because of the common chemical quenchers are water, dissolved oxygen, certain salts, acids, chlorinated hydrocarbons, peroxides that may be present in the sample. Okay, we can tackle the chemical quenching, or we can reduce the effect of chemical quenching by increasing the concentration of fluor in the scintillation cocktail. When you are preparing the scintillation cocktail, the concentration of fluor should be higher. Okay, now the second type of quenching is color quenching. Okay, color quenching is absorption of photons emitted by the secondary fluor by certain substances in the sample. That means the photons, the energy that is released by the secondary fluor is absorbed by the substance present in the sample. It is called as color quenching because basically severe quenching occurs with yellow, red or brown substances. Okay, yellow, red or brown substances. Here severe quenching occurs, hence it is called as color quenching. It doesn't mean that colorless compound won't absorb, they also do. Okay, now the secondary fluor sometimes emits in the UV region also, and color quenching occurs through absorption in this region also. That means certain substances present in the sample can absorb energy released by the secondary fluor either in UV range or in visible range, and hence your detection will not be detected because energy is absorbed by the sample itself. This quenching can be reduced again by increasing the fluor concentration. Then there is another important, that is dilution quenching. It is caused by dilution of the solvent and the fluor by the sample. High dilution will reduce the probability of scintillating event occurring naturally. So this type of quenching normally takes place when working with liquid samples. Okay. So you have to take care of the dilution factor and reduce the dilution so that dilution quenching will not take place. Right. Now optical quenching, in case of optical quenching, the sample does not interfere. Actually, the scintillation wires, the dirty scintillation wires interfere with light emitted by the sample and prevents its passage to the detector. So if your scintillation vials are not dirty, then optical quenching will not occur. Okay, if they are dirty, if the vials are dirty, then the light emitted by the sample may not easily reach the detector. So quenching may take place. Okay, so this is all about the can say disadvantages of scintillation counters. So we'll stop here, and in the next presentation we'll discuss about measurement of stable isotopes. We have discussed here measurement of radioisotopes by Geiger-Müller counter and by scintillation counter. Next time we will discuss about the measurement of stable isotopes.